So as we talk about this concept and this reality of being rooted in love, a couple things kind of came to mind, and one of these is this illustration of a plant. And the reason this is because in John chapter 15, as Jesus is giving this last prayer, his last sermon and message, if you will, to his closest friends and disciples, there's one thing that remains constant. In John chapter 15, almost a dozen times, Jesus says, remain, 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 remain. He says, remain in me as I remain in you. In other translations, it says, abide in me. But he says, remain in me, remain in my love. Remain, let my words remain in you. And he's constantly saying, remain, remain, and remain. And I think the reason Jesus says this is because our tendency, if we're not careful, is to escape, escape, escape. And so when we think of this idea of this plant remaining in its soil, it's the picture that Jesus gives us. He says, if you would just remain in my love, let's call it the soil. If you would just remain in my love, you would bear much fruit. You would see things happen. I think the problem sometimes that occurs is that maybe we don't see the growth that we thought we would see when we first experienced this love and this relationship with Jesus. And so we say, well, God, you promised so many beautiful things to me, but I'm not seeing it. This plant called my life is still pretty small. I thought I would be a sequoia by now, but I'm still this tiny little house plant. God, what are you doing? And so instead of remaining in God's love, we quickly jump ship to whatever's bigger or better. And we think, well, maybe it's my job that will bring me the satisfaction and the happiness that I'm looking for. But you know what? Maybe it's this relationship with this significant other. The past ones weren't working, so maybe this is what it is. I just need a different circumstance. And so often we base our life and our identity in the things and the people and the places around us instead of being rooted and remaining in the love of God and remaining in good soil. And then when we quickly realize that circumstances don't bring us joy, and if it does, it's happiness that's fleeting, we quickly jump to the next thing and we think, well, that wasn't working, so I need to go to the next thing. And we constantly do this. When Jesus says, if you would just remain in me, I'm here, I'm constant, I'm faithful, I'm not going anywhere. My love is good and it's for you, and I have good things that I promise you. But we constantly jump from thing to thing or person to person, place to place, trying to get this temporary satisfaction, this quick fix, if you will. And sometimes we even sacrifice it to the point of, man, we know what God has called us into and there's this big purpose and it scares us, so we try to settle for something a lot smaller. And it doesn't fit in the plans and purposes that he has for us. Man, they just can't contain in this little circumstantial box that we try to put God in. But Jesus says, if you would just remain in me, if you would just remain in the good and beautiful soil of my love, then you would see good things happen. And what's beautiful is when Jesus calls us to remain, so much of what he wants to do is beneath the surface. It's the root system. It's the trust factor. It's the perseverance that he's trying to develop inside of us. See, this plant is only as strong as the roots that it grows beneath the soil. If the roots are too shallow, then anything will knock it over, and any kind of storm will blow it over. And Jesus is saying, listen, if you would just remain in me, what I want to do in you is more important than what I want to do through you. It's only out of an overflow of what I want to do in you that you're going to do things in this world. See, we can do a lot of good things, but unless we remain in the soil of his love, we can't do a lot of God things.